Okay.
To the May meeting of Public Safety Commission.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second by Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it is approved. The next matter on the agenda is personnel.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This morning, it brings me great pleasure to be able to take the opportunity to recognize some of our personnel as well as a member of our public this morning, and to give you a little backstory on this. And I'm gonna ad lib a lot of this, so I'm not looking down reading. But I believe it was on April the 16th. We responded to a call for service at Red Lobster. We all know where Red Lobster's at. Report of a male that had collapsed, and breathing status and pulse was unknown. Upon our arrival of Engine 4 A shift, we encountered the patient who was laying on the floor. Confirmed no pulse, no breathing status. And we had a member of our public, one of the other employees at Red Lobster, who was administering CPR. Typically, just to give you an idea of the situation when we encounter something like this, survivability greatly depends on a timely response as well as early intervention efforts such as CPR. At the conclusion of this incident, and I'm going to recognize our citizen first this morning, but at conclusion of this incident, the lieutenant that was in charge of the crew that day rode into the hospital with the ambulance crew, and he told me something in 25 years I've never heard, but that the patient hugged his neck and thanked him. It's just an incredible story, and something that as we go through these awards this morning, that is something that I'll probably say again, it's just unprecedented. Everything fell just the way it needed to give this patient the most chance at surviving this incident. And it was determined that he did have a massive heart attack that morning. So this morning, first and foremost, I want to recognize our citizen this morning, Mr. Aaron Wagner. If you would please come forward. When our crews arrived, Mr. Wagner, as I've already said, was already doing CPR, and the reports that I've been told is that as soon as the patient collapsed, Mr. Wagner assessed the situation and began CPR. And I can tell you this morning, I feel that I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, he gave the patient the chance to live and the chance for us to do our job by early intervention of CPR. And this is just a great example of the effects that CPR and citizen CPR has on the survivability of the patient. And this morning, we'll be presenting Mr. Wagner with the Citizen Life Saving Award. In the last 5 years, this is only the second time that I have awarded this award. We do not take this lightly, and it is a great honor to receive this. And I'll read the commendation, the award that will be given. It says, "You are hereby commended for your outstanding performance in providing aid to an individual in full arrest. Your response to the situation and rapid action in providing basic life support directly contributed to a positive patient outcome. Please accept our gratitude and recognition of your efforts. Your exemplary performance speaks to your character, professionalism, and dedication to our community." Aaron, thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you. And next is our personnel. Now, typically, this is a hard decision within our ranks. If you don't know, we have an awards committee. This awards committee is comprised of our personnel and our staff. Our awards committee is not known to any of our staff with the exception of those that are on the awards committee. We do that with intent so that nobody can be swayed, harassed, or anything else when somebody is recommended for an award. And when one of our personnel or a company of our personnel do CPR, that's a hard decision because after all, our guys look at it as well, that's our job. But as I've already said this morning, in this incident, everything fell into place and everybody did their job without hesitation. And just the sheer outcome of this incident urged the committee to award this morning the 3 individuals that made up Company 4A. And the officer unfortunately could not be with us. He's in Florida doing his second job. So this morning, we do have 2 of Company 4A with us this morning, and I'll ask Engineer Mark Richardson and Firefighter Austin Williams, if you would please stand. And I'll read their commendations this morning. These are individual commendations for their actions on April the 16th. It says, you are hereby commended for your outstanding job performance in providing aid to an individual in cardiac arrest. Your rapid assessment and treatment greatly increased patient viability prior to transport. Further, your efforts throughout transport afforded the patient the best possible chance for survival and resulted in a successful patient outcome. Please accept our gratitude and recognition of your efforts. Your exemplary performance speaks to your character, professionalism, and dedicated service our department provides to our citizens. Mark, Austin, thank you and congratulations. Gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to recognize our personnel this morning.
Congratulations. We couldn't be proud. Fire department, what a way to start on that. Step in. What a great way to start. Congratulations. Break for 5 minutes for pictures and then we'll come back to our meeting.
Did we pay the bill? Did we pay the bill? Yeah, I was seconding on the,
Starts with a W, I know. I'm shorter than he is.
as Whit, you said Whitfield and then, yeah.
I know, I figured that.
We're like, okay.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah. I know the community is like happy to be able to see that.
I am. For sure.
Happy you were there.
Absolutely. She taught me how to do CPR 3 days before this happened. 3 days. Yeah.
Well, nice seeing
I'm not
you.
certified or anything. Yeah. Yeah.
No, Matt, you did good. That was great job.
I think you can remember, right? Remember, Samson? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I pulled up the floor. And I'm gonna have to get a painter soon. That's the difference. Yeah. You know? I want to redo the casing. Right. Yeah. Because that's that new mandate from the FBI, right? Who's gonna be working in the building? They got you don't know that was fine. Don't know. At all.
Thanks so much. We're going to get the meeting started back. The next thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the April 26th meeting. I have a motion by Mr. Weaver.
Second.
Second by Mr. Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Next up is the alcohol applications permit. Mr. Miller, I believe.
Chairman, I'm standing in for Jesse this morning. The first on your agenda is Mariscos El Cumaron, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name, Jose Martinez Jr. Mr. Martinez, if you'll come forward. The address is 229 North Hamilton Street. This is for, it will be a restaurant in conjunction. He wants to pour beer, wine, and pour liquor. We reviewed the application in the city attorney's office, and it is on its face approvable. We've reviewed it. But I'll ask you a couple of questions, and everybody here for the alcohol permits, it's the same question. So if you guys just kind of pay attention, we'll go through this pretty quickly.
Sure thing.
Could you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, sir. It's Jose G. Martinez Jr.
Have you had a chance to review all the laws and regulations that go along with this alcohol?
Yes, sir.
Alcohol permit? Do you have any questions for the committee?
I don't have any questions for the committee, sir.
Are you aware of our concern about underage consumption of alcohol?
Yes, sir. Definitely. Yes, sir.
Motion to approve.
By Mr. Brown,
Second.
second by Mr. Walker. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll make a recommendation.
Yes, sir. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The second item on your agenda for alcohol licensing is an entity called Kumo Sushi, Inc., doing business as Kumo Sushi Hibachi. The owner is Kumo Sushi, Inc. The applicant is Chin Xiong Wei. Mr. Wei, are you here? Please come forward. It's at 1277 North Glenwood Avenue. State your name for the record.
My name is Ken Ning. I'm from the Kumo Sushi restaurant.
Did you hear the questions that I had asked earlier? Have you had a chance to review the?
Yes.
Questions for us?
No.
And as Mr. Weaver said, we want to point out that we frown on underage drinking. So
Motion to approve.
Mr. Whitfield, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll make a recommendation to Mayor and City Council.
Thank you.
Chair and Commissioners, the next one is an entity called Dagoberto Hernandez Llc. The applicant, manager, and majority owner is Nancy A. Hernandez. Is Ms. Hernandez here? If you'll come forward. This is at 801 East Walnut Avenue, Suites C, D, and E. They operate under the name Taqueria El Rey, number 3. And it's a restaurant for pouring beer and pouring liquor.
Nancy Hernandez.
Questions I'd asked earlier.
Yes. Mhm. Yes. No. Yes, sir.
Make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Walker, second by Mr. Weaver. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll make that recommendation to Mayor and City Council that it's approved. Thank you for your time. Chair, the last one, but let me just reiterate, the first 3 you approved were for restaurants pouring with regard to restaurant operations. This is a convenience store. The name of the owner is Olivia Enterprise LLC. The applicant, manager, I believe owner is Linda Kreider. Ms. Kreider, if you would come forward. Operates as JAS Jazz, is that correct? Tobacco?
Tobacco, yeah.
At 601 Fleming Street, Suite A, and she's seeking a license for packaged beer. Could you introduce yourself?
My name's Linda Ann Crotter. Yes. No. Yeah. Yes, I do too.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walker. All in favor?
Aye.
Make a recommendation to the mayor and city council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is the police department. Chief?
Trying to buy Todd a little bit of time to get his glasses there. They don't want y'all to notice or anything,
And
but
just so y'all know, the application, you're not required to stay. We're gonna talk about some fun stuff like finance and stuff, but so you guys are welcome to stay. You're welcome to leave. It's
no problem. All right, the very first item on the agenda for the police department is the crime and crash statistics for the month of April 2022. If you'll turn to page 6 in your packets, that's where that will begin. You'll notice that this is the summary of data for April 2022 in comparison to the 5-year averages. Part 1 crimes are still lower than the 5-year average by approximately 22.7%, which is a very positive trend, which we've had for the last year or so. Part 2 crimes have also decreased in comparison to the 5-year average, roughly 23% lower. You'll see that crashes are up and compared to the 5-year average. That was the only thing on this page that really stood out, as we're really seeing those crash numbers go back up to pre-pandemic levels, which, you know, everything's returning to more of a normal workday here inside Whitfield County. And so our crashes are starting to reflect that. The next page in the packet for the crime and crash statistics for April is on page 7. This contains the crime dashboard table with the 5-year comparisons. I could just mention, you'll notice that the traffic crashes, which is the very last item on the table there, for up to the month of April, we were sitting at 460 crashes for the year, which is really close to what we were seeing back in 2018 and 2019. So the numbers, you know, are definitely back to the pre-pandemic level. Last year, pretty much every month, we were talking about violent crimes and how we were really seeing a uptick in those. You'll notice that the violent crime totals are down in that table, which is something that we're pleased to see. They're still slightly higher than they were prior to the pandemic kicking off, but they are returning to a more normal level, which is positive. We did have an uptick in the number of reported rape cases and robbery cases thus far in 2022, but we anticipate those will either decrease or be closer to what the 5-year average is as we move forward in the year. Based off the statistics from the previous 5 years, property crime numbers are lower than the average, which is very positive, and violent crime numbers are lower than the 5-year average as well. Next page in the packet is page 8. This contains a direct comparison of April 2021 to April of 2022. You'll see that under the Part 1 offenses, larceny, thefts are up slightly in 2022. The trend on that, we've had a couple of months where we've seen an increase, and that's an uptick in some of the shoplifting cases from some of the box retailers and other things. But it will most likely stabilize as the year goes on. Our calls for service are down, and that's been something we've seen for the last few months, is that the total calls for service are down. Some of that is going to be tied to our staffing levels being significantly below staff. There's less self-initiated activities and that kind of thing. But you'll notice that we have had an uptick in enforcement actions with citations and warning citations issued. So the guys and girls of the police department are working very hard. It's just there's not as many of them out there on the road, which impacts the total cost for service number slightly. But we do have 5 cadets in this academy. You'll get to meet them at the June PSC meeting, and 1 pre-service candidate that we're bringing on board. So with those 6, hopefully by October or November, we'll start to see our staffing levels on the road improve, and the probably self-initiated activity will follow that closely as well. Very qualified group of individuals that we will be bringing to y'all in June. I'm very pleased with their backgrounds, and thus far, we still have a couple more weeks left in the academy, but they have been zero maintenance for us in the academy, which is what we want. We don't hear anything bad, so it's a wonderful sign. There's very high achievers, and we're hoping that continues their entire career here with the police department.
Attribute some of the quality of candidate, increase in candidates to the pay that was increased, or what do you attribute that to?
I think the increase in compensation is helping us draw some of these pre-service candidates from out of state. And it is separating us a little bit within this region. But I think this is kind of the unicorn group of applicants that came through. It's just across the board. That whole group was much sharper than what we'd seen with some previous applicants. So we're very pleased with that. But on a down note, we do have 2 that are in the hiring process for FBI. They have conditional officers. So and there are another couple of those that are super highly qualified, and the FBI has seen their skill set. So, we'll hire a few really good ones, and I anticipate some of these will probably be bound for federal service at some point later as well. But we definitely do not have issues with that, because we think that's a positive and logical step for some of these young men and women. All right, if you look at page your packet, this is the significant events. There's not as many specific cases on here as you'll see a lot of months, but we did have a series of entering autos that kind of stood out, and motor vehicle theft that were the result of some juveniles, young people that were taking advantage of vehicles with keys in them, as well as unsecured vehicles. Some arrests were made on those. We hope it'll have a positive impact on our May crime statistics with those individuals being taken into custody. But that was one of those things. The area of Chattanooga Road, we did see quite a few entering autos just during the month of April. There was also the very last report listed on that page, 2272, is a robbery. It's kind of the new norm when you see robbery reports. It was individuals went by trying to recover the debt on another issue, which was most likely drug related, and ended up robbing the individual at that apartment of what they thought was equal value to the debt that was incurred on the other. So very strange new trend we're seeing, but we have seen more of those types of cases, and they do meet the threshold for being classified as a robbery. So a little bit unusual there. And page 10 is the crash statistics for April 2022. Injury crashes and injuries increased in comparison to March of this year. Rear end crashes are the most prevalent, and following too closely was the leading contributing factor. Walnut Avenue had the most crashes for the month, but Thornton and Chattanooga Road had the most injuries for the month. Friday was the high crash day of the week, and The most prevalent time to be involved in a motor vehicle crash inside the city of Dalton during the month of April was between 4 and 7 p.m. And you'll see on the table there that there were 28 following too closely crashes. And another issue that was a little higher than what I anticipated was the number of DUI involved crashes. For the month of April, we had 4. A lot of times we won't have as many crashes directly tied to the DUI because they'll get stopped for other moving violations, prior to being involved in the crash, but they were up in April compared to some previous months. If you've got any questions about the crime or crash statistics for the month of April 2022, I'd be happy to try to answer those for you at this time. If not, I submit the crash and crime statistics for April 22 for your approval.
My only question on the DUI is if they were drunk but following too closely and then there's an accident, do you file that as a DUI or classify it as a DUI crash, or do you does it fall into both buckets, or how does it?
With the way the National Incident-Based Reporting System works, which is the old UCR data, now all of the offenses get put into the system. So it would be a DUI crash because that's the most serious violation on it, but also you could have following too closely, too fast for conditions. So you could see in a single crash that there's multiple contributing factors. So, but obviously the most serious offense of all of those would be the impairment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Make that motion.
Second.
Aye.
Opposed?
Next item up for the police department for the month of April 2022 is the financial statistics for the month. You'll notice that, and this is starts on page 11 in your packet. You'll notice that we are on track for the year. We've expended approximately 30% of our budget for 2022 at the end of April. We're slightly under budget for the year, but with the fuel cost hovering in around $4 a gallon right now, we expect much of that surplus that we're having to have to be transferred to cover those costs. We've run the numbers. Assistant Chief Crossan did the other day, and we're anticipating somewhere around about a $50,000 shortage if the fuel prices remain at this current level for the rest of the year. We have taken some steps to try to reduce the amount of runtime on motors and other things, but a lot of the work we do is dictated by responding to calls. So we do consume fuel in the process of doing that, but we will be keeping a close eye on the budget and working with the finance department as we go forward to make the budget transfers to shore up those lines. But across the board, supplies, fuel, as y'all know, everything that we consume is significantly higher than what it has been in years past. So we'll probably be having to touch multiple lines and do adjustments on those. But we anticipate that we'll be able to do that without a tremendous burden on the taxpayers having to put money from general fund in there. We think we'll be able to move some lap salaries is what the finance director is planning to do for us on there. So if you've got questions about anything contained in the financial statistics or pages included with that supporting documents, I'd be happy to answer them for you. If not, I submit the April 2022 financial report for your approval.
Chief, when you say you're taking measures, fuel saving measures, I'm just, in my mind, I go to less patrols or not hitting the accelerator. Like what does that mean?
But driving behaviors can reduce the fuel consumption, but you'll probably notice when you see a police car, and over the last few years, when you see a police car, whether there's an officer in it or not, it's locked and it was generally running. And it's because of all the electronics and other stuff inside the vehicles. They're trying to keep them fired up. And I think some of it was comfort, didn't want to be hot or cold when they got back in the car. we've instructed our staff that the engines aren't to be left running continuously, that a little bit of discomfort about being a little warm or whatever will not cause them any great distress. And that we've got to be more cognizant of the fact that the fuel is expensive, and that's a way that we can reduce the runtime and gallons burnt per vehicle per day. So we're doing that, but we have not. There are some agencies that are doubling up units for patrol and other things. We're not doing that. We still have our staffing levels that we expect to be out there in each zone each day, and we're still doing that. But the little things that we can do with reducing the number of hours the engines are idling and other things, we've started addressing. So, and thus far, it looks like it is reducing the monthly fuel consumption. So it is having a positive effect on that.
Hey, for you, when you talk about fuel nationally, as far as the fuel problem goes, do you think there's going to be a fuel shortage in that you won't be able to have your vendor supply fuel to you, or you think it's going to be cost driven and there'll be fuel there? It'll be just how many dollars they can tack on per gallon.
Thus far, we haven't had any disruption in the supply. A few years back, there were a couple of occasions where the city barn was unable to get fuel deliveries and stuff. Right now, that's not been the case. It's just we're paying much more per gallon than what we have traditionally paid. And, it's having a negative impact across the city on our fuel consumption costs. So, but we have not had any word from the Public Works Department that they've been notified about any delays or shortages thus far. But you never can tell. It is. Yeah, I would be surprised if the trend reverses itself anytime soon. So, we're just going to have to do what we can to make sure we reduce as much of the consumption as we can. But we will not reduce services to do it.
Chief, have we looked into any alternatives, modes of transportation, fleet transportation as an option?
We haven't got to that point yet, Mr. Walker. I think it's something that in the coming months, we may need to start exploring more because some of the electric vehicles and other things are much more reliable than what they used to be. But, we would, if the city makes a choice to start switching over to some of those vehicles for the fleet, and we're also got to address the fact of we'd have to have charging stations at ours, the fire service buildings and other things to, address those. So that will be, I'm sure, a topic in the months to come to try to figure out what the cost would be to start making a transition in the coming years to get to that and be less fossil fuel dependent.
Electric or even motorcycles in that sense. I don't know how traffic feels about that or not. But less consumption at this point in time for the cost going towards the city, I think would be a better option moving forward. I think we do need to look into that. In general, I'm sure there's a bunch of other electric vehicles out there, and there are affordable ones also that can be used for fleet consumption at this point in time. But I think we do need to look at that as prices begin to soar and just the sustainability for the city itself.
A lot of the larger municipalities have started transitioning slowly to the EVs, but they're not doing it as much in the patrol function as they are in other administrative, investigative type functions where, it's more feasible to do. So, that may be the way we dip our toe into the pool to figure out how it works, is start transitioning on that side of the house and, build the infrastructure and everything to actually have a fleet at some point in the future that, can be used for patrol and that kind of thing. But we'll definitely look into it. And if any of y'all have any guidance or sources or anything that you want to point our way, that's definitely new technology for us. So feel free to share it with us and we'll explore that.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walker. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? They are approved.
The final item on the agenda for the police department this morning is the policy reviews for the month of April. And you will see that there's a significant amount of policies on the list. This month, we had 8, trying to get back on track. I think we'll be back down to the 3 or 4 policies a month after this month, but a couple of ones on here this month are very minor changes, so we should be able to get through those fairly quickly. Like I said, there's 8 policies. The very first policy that's up for approval is our table of organization. The biggest changes on that is we had to update some employee totals. As y'all are aware, the code enforcement function is now being handled through the city administration, not through the police department anymore. So the chart reflects us removing that function from the police department. You'll also see that we reclassified one position in the property and evidence section. That was a civilian position before. Now it's got a sworn officer in that position. P&E goes back and forth. We'll have sworn individuals in there for a period, and then we'll have some transition with civilians in there. So that change comes up every few years when we do see some turnovers in those areas. But our staffing levels are also adjusting to reflect the changes with less SROs being requested by the school system for the 2022, 2023 contract period. And so we just took the opportunity to adjust our table of organization to match what it's going to be going forward. 4.18 is the public safety cadet program. Prior to us switching to the public safety cadet program, it was the Explorer program. So the adjustments to the new policy for public safety cadet program incorporate the previous policy for ride along and updates of all the terminology to reflect public safety cadet versus Explorer program. So it's not a new policy to the department, it's just an adjustment of the terminology and phrasing used in those. 4.19 is emergency death, serious injury, and serious illness notifications. Just slight rewording in that. Nothing all that significant with that one. 6.7 is the automated emergency notification system. This system does still exist. Mr. Whitfield asked about it earlier today, and is maintained by the 911 center. A lot of the changes in the document there with the rewording was talking about referring to the Whitfield 911 center versus the EMA up there, which is how it was previously referred to. So it just matches the terminology for what is used to refer to 911 center now. 7.2 is burglary and robbery alarm procedures. The change I noticed in there is the word shall being inserted versus will. It's just language on that just to reflect how our other policies are worded as well. 7.15 is roadblocks. The change that I noticed when I was reviewing that policy was using the word unmarked versus civilian vehicles. And it's just one of those, we do have a number of unmarked vehicles in our fleet, and it talks about us not using those for that purpose, but an individual versus the word citizen. That trend of using citizen in the policies is kind of run its course. So now it is a individual is inserted where we used to have citizen in policies. You have 7.17. It's the criminal intelligence policy. There were no changes, just the evaluation dates. And 7.26, the unmanned aircraft system. This is our drone program, basically, and some rewording, and removed a requirement for one of the quarterly evaluations that we were already taking care of through our reviews downstairs. So the policy now reflects that. But out of the 8 policies, they're very, very straightforward. The changes in them, we sent them to city legal for review to make sure they were in compliance with state law, any applicable CLIA standards for any of the policies that are governed by that. And the feedback that Terry provided to Sean was incorporated in the changes to the policies to get them into the form they are at this time. If you've got any questions about any of those 8 policies, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, I submit them for your approval.
Second.
Yeah, our office has reviewed them and worked with the department on them. So from a legal point of view, they're approved.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
All right, good morning again. We'll jump right in this morning. I've consumed quite a bit of y'all's time this morning already. So we'll jump right into our April instant statistical report, the statistical report. And that begins for the fire department, that begins on page number 66. And again, this is the second month of our new style report from our new records management system. We're continually tweaking and trying to update this, but this report should look familiar as this is the same one we reported last week. And I'm going to go ahead and admit that the first line of that report, I searched that report and I could not find it because there is one report that falls under no category, but rest assured, every report I found had a category. So I'm not sure where that report is pulling from, but otherwise, as you look down through that report, you see that it begins with the 100 codes, which is our fire codes, and goes down from there. And it shows at the percentage of which those transpired, as well as the last line shows our average response time for each category for those incidents. And bear in mind, it does not take us 6 minutes and 6.7 minutes to get to a structure fire. That is simply because once we arrive, when we have a structure fire, we typically have a second alarm or a second call for more apparatus. So that goes into and factors into your average response time. That's one of the things that jumped out to me in that page was it has the appearance it takes us over 6 minutes to get to a structure fire, but that's because of the subsequent apparatus that are called in to help with that fire. But looking as usual, the most of our incidents are made up of our medical assist. So out of the 318 incidents, 163 of those were medical in nature. And then the subsequent lines that's in the 300 codes are all medical in nature as well. Those all, according to NIFRS, fall into those categories. So you see that consumed a lot of our incidents were in medical in nature. Those response times look good, by the way. But moving on to page number 68, that's the total page. You see that 303 of the 318 incidents were in the city. 15 of those were aid given responses where we provided aid, whether mutual or automatic aid to Whitfield County. Our average response time was 3.9 minutes for those 318 calls. And moving on to the next report on page, my page is cut off. On page 69, this is the graph that shows our incidents broken down by stations. Of course, as usual, Station 1 consumes most of our incidents every month. 38.99% of the 318 incidents were in District 1. And incidentally, all the incidents go in numerical order, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So but that's just showing you how our incidents break down monthly by district or by station. On page number 70, this is our response summary by station. And as we move forward, I hope this creates a little bit of competition with our stations and encourages them to have even better response times, because you see that this breaks down all of their response categories and as far as responses go, but by station. So you see that Station 1 had 124 responses. Just over 2% of those were fire, 68% of those were medical, and 4.28 calls per day for Station 1. So you kind of see how that report goes. Page number 70 is our average response time by station. Again, looking down through those, bear in mind that these response times on this particular report include our average turnout time, which is from the time that the call comes into the station or we are notified until we go en route, which would be indicated by the next report. Our average turnout time is 1 minute and 10 seconds. And our overall response time for Station 1, District 1, for example, is 4 minutes and 6 seconds. All of those well below national standard and requirements for our department. But looking at page number 73, this is our average travel time. This is the one that we typically used to report on, and that number should look a little more familiar for you. That our average response time or travel time is 3 minutes and 13 seconds for the month of April. And by the way, the national recommendation and requirement is 9 minutes or less. So we're doing pretty good on that. Page number 74 and 75, this breaks down our incidents by incident type, NIFRS incident type. And again, you'll see that most of our calls, and by the way, these go in numerical order. So medical assist being the top 163 and on down the line to total up the 318 incidents. There was nothing in the month of April that just stood out to me. It was pretty normal month for us. The next report is one of the new reports that I introduced to the commission last month. This breaks down our incident types by staff hours. And so it shows just how much time we spend on incidents and each particular incident. And there again, you see that if you compare it to the previous report, we had 163 incidents that fell under 311, and those totaled 166.21 staff hours. Whereas if you look at building fires, for instance, you'll see that we had, I believe it was one building fire, but we had 26 hours just on that one. So you can see which ones, which incidents are more labor intensive. But in the month of April, we had 534.96 staff hours committed to incident responses as a total. The next page is our incident by months. And you'll see, again, I brought the commission's attention to August of last month. I still ain't been able to figure out why we run so many calls in August of last year, but you see that they've leveled out, and we pretty much have averaged between 310 to 340 calls, 350 calls on average per month. So nothing jumping out as far as that goes. Pages 79 through 80, this breaks down all our calls. Again, it's just another way to break it down and shows the number of fires, deaths, injuries. And the purpose of this report is to be able to report. This is the only report we can pull that shows our property loss, our content loss. So you see that in the month of April, on our one fire that we had, that $12,700 estimated loss as a result of that fire. And then on page number 80, this breaks down our false alarms and responses to those types of calls. The next page and the last on our incident statistical is on page 81. This breaks down our mutual aid or automatic aid. And that was given in the month of April. You'll see that we had on this report shows 16 total aid provided, or 15 total aid provided. One was received. And again, that aid that we received was an automatic aid, and we actually canceled him on that call. So, but that's a good breakdown. There are some that falls through the crack just because if we respond for Whitfield County, if they do not arrive on scene, it's not an aid call, it's our call, even though it's a county resident. So there are many more that are there, but working to get those again. The next on our statistical report for April is our training division report. You see that according to the training division, we continued our recruit class. We still have 3 candidates enrolled. They have completed as of last week. They have completed their structural fire part of the recruit school. They're in their medical training this week. They do have 2 days to make up of the structural fire just because we had 3 severely dehydrated recruits. And so we canceled the last 2 days, which are their 2 testing days. So they'll be making those up this week now that we have them good and hydrated. We actually took one of them to the hospital on Thursday evening just to get tested. We were afraid he had rhabdo, but he ended up not having that. So that was a good thing. But we'll finish up the structural firefighting part of it and continue their medical this week, and they should conclude by next Friday. I did receive a report this morning from the training chief that they tested their NPQ yesterday and all 3 passed. So we get to keep them so far. As long as they pass their medical, we're in good shape. But total, looking at the month of April, we totaled 2,138 hours. Bear in mind, that number does seem a little bit lower, but we do not total our recruit training hours, including our current staff, until the end of recruit school, and then we'll be reporting on the total for recruit school. So looking at outside schools, we had 2 firefighters that attended acting officer in charge at the academy, and 1 officer attended the executive fire department executive at the academy as well, and also attained the NPQ Fire Officer 4 certification, which that's a feat in itself to be able to attain that certification. That takes years of different classes and different certifications to get that. So that is something to be proud of. Last on our statistical report is our inspections division report. And this is a 1-pager. This is not a mistake, but this report actually shows everything that they have done for the month. And the preventions chief asked me, said, "Chief, do I need to put something else?" And I said, "Well, what else we need?" So if you guys would like to see something more, then just let me know and we can add to it. I'd prefer not to put the violations by location, just because we've had some businesses that call in that'll show up on the report as a violation, but it's just because their fire extinguisher tag was out of date or something. And people look at that and call and question them on it. So we can provide that if requested by you guys. But all in all, looking at April inspections by stations, they conducted a total of 163 inspections, and you see how those are broken down. 38% of those were made up by annual inspections, and then you see how the rest of them fall in. That is our April statistical report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have. If not, I'd ask your approval for our statistical report.
The one that I have, Chief, on what's over the counter stuff? It says OTC. I don't know if that's what it stands for. That's what my mind.
OTC, that's basically essentially a business license.
Make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
All right.
opposed?
Thank you. Next on our agenda is our financial report, and just looking at the bottom line, I'm you'll see that we finished April at approximately 29.6% of our budget expended, which puts us falling under budget at that point in the year. Again, looking specifically at some of our lines, as I have stated before, our salary lines are like right on the nose, if not a little bit over or under. That will come back in line as we go. We had some large, I think I've reported to the commission before, we had some training classes that we had large attendance at. Those were special operations classes, and we have no more of those scheduled for the remainder of this year. So we should see our payroll budget come back in line, because bear in mind, we're still 3 personnel short. So that should be reflected in the payroll, and I'm keeping a close eye on that to make sure that comes back in line the way it should. And the only other line, is Chief Kaysen has already brought your attention to, is our fuel lines. We fully anticipate that we're going to fall well short if something doesn't change course with the cost of fuel. We have been taking some fuel conservation efforts. Basically, our guys, we can't break up a company or those that ride on a truck. So we encourage 1 trip a day to the store or whatever they need. But right now we're doing hydrants and doing some things that are required by ISO and various things such as that, and as well, it's hard to do recruit school without fire trucks. So we should see our fuel consumption slow down a little bit after the month of May, early June, because we'll be completing our hydrant flows and our hydrant checks and things like that. But right now, I've done some figures as requested by Finance Department administration. And right now it appears that we're going to fall somewhere between $35,000 and $50,000 short in our fuel line if the trend does not reverse. But as I've said, I'm not sure once hydrants get done, I'm not sure how that's going to look. And unfortunately, unlike Chief Kaysen, I'm not going to have salary lapses to be able to make up mine. Because as I've already reported, we're right on the button with our salary, if not a little bit over budget in our regular wages line. So we're monitoring that, and we'll make adjustments as needed as we go through the remainder part of the year. I do not forecast that we'll be over budget, with the exception of fuel in any one line. But that is our April financial report. I'd be happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll ask your approval for a financial report.
Sorry.
Second by Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Opposed? They are approved.
Good. Last thing I have on our agenda is one policy. This was an update, no changes. This is Sop Gp6. This policy covers vehicle accidents involving our vehicles versus public property. And you can see that it's short and sweet. This goes right along and coincides with the city's drug-free policy. It does create one exception for the requirement for screening, and that is if the other party is found at fault at scene by police department and they are ticketed, then it becomes the discretion of the officer in charge as to whether or not our party that was involved has to have a drug screening or alcohol screening. But otherwise, all accidents require drug screening. As I said, there was no changes. Mr. Miller and I discussed this a while ago just to make sure he was good too. And I believe I got the nod of approval on that one.
To approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walker. All in favor?
All right.
And just a note, I received an invoice yesterday for our new fire truck. This is the second, of the approved apparatus purchases according to in the 2020 SPOST. And we will be having a couple of personnel go to Ohio for final inspection on June the 12th. And then we hopefully, if no issues are found, we will receive it a couple of days later and then begin the process of putting it in service. We have run into a few problems. As everybody knows, y'all have heard the term inflation. That applies to fire department equipment as well. Just case in point, I've been working with administration on some capital purchases potentially. But 2 years ago, our SCBA's, our air packs were $4,800. They're now $100 short of $7,000. So when you start compiling those and you start looking at the purchase of equipment, there's things we're having to not purchase and try to recycle very old equipment. So we're working through some of those issues, and fortunately, that's the deputy chief's problem. So, so he is working through that. But just wanted to bring that to you guys' attention. Thank you.
We are
I'm not
adjourned.
going to be antisocial, but I have out-of-town guests waiting for me to have breakfast. All right,
well, enjoy your
They must be starving.
Yeah.
They must be starving.
I lost my wife. What do we have?
But she's mad. She's already mad.
Yeah.
See you, Bill.
Get out of the way here. Clear your path. Clear your path.
I gotta run too. Business away.
See you on the dog walk this afternoon.
See you
Talking
later.
about Sigmund. When I seen that last night,
Oh, yeah.
yes, sir.
I'll be my man.
I agree with you.
Is Mr.
Yeah.
Williams?
Or even a motorcycle or something.
Yes.